You don't have to announce your healing to people who were rooting for your brokenness. You don't have to prove your worth by making noise. You don't have to be seen to be valuable. Some of the most powerful transformations happen in silence, unseen, uncelebrated, and completely undeniable. I remember the season when everyone around me seemed to be sprinting, chasing milestones, collecting achievements like shiny tokens they could display for the world to see. It was loud, it was fast, it was endless. Promotions were being posted, vacations were being flaunted, engagements were being announced, and it felt like life was one giant race where everyone had a head start. Except me. I wasn't sprinting, I wasn't collecting, I wasn't loud, I was quiet. I was just trying to keep going. And I won't lie to you, there were days I felt like a failure. I scrolled through endless highlight reels of people doing more, having more, being more. And I started believing the lie that if you're not being seen, you're not succeeding. That if you're not moving fast, you're falling behind. But what I've come to understand through hard lessons, through therapy, through sitting with my own uncomfortable silence, is that the loud race isn't always the right race. Sometimes the quiet, slow path is exactly where you're supposed to be. Sometimes the most important things you'll ever build, your character, your peace, your integrity, aren't built on stages. They're built in small, private, faithful decisions when no one is watching. It's hard to stay the course when no one is cheering. It's hard to believe you're growing when the results aren't flashy. But that's the thing about real growth. It doesn't need a stage to be powerful. It doesn't need an audience to be meaningful. Some of the most transformational work we'll ever do happens in silence, in obscurity, in the parts of our story that will never trend. Psychology calls this intrinsic growth, the slow internal development that's driven by personal meaning, not by external rewards. It's the kind of growth that sticks, the kind that lasts, the kind that's not performative. But here's the real challenge. Can you trust your quiet season? Can you choose the slow path, even when everything around you is screaming to speed up? Can you find peace knowing that some of your deepest work will never be seen, but it will shape you forever? There's a quote that has stayed with me: "The trees with the deepest roots don't fear the wind." And that's what you're doing. You're growing roots right now, quietly, steadily, without applause. And that's not failure. That's not falling behind. That's where the real strength is born. There's a particular ache that no one really prepares you for. The ache of waiting for an apology that will never come. I spent years in that waiting room. I kept thinking that healing was something that would begin when someone else decided to show up. I thought I needed their recognition, their remorse, their words to set me free. I wanted them to come back. I wanted them to say, "I see what I did to you. I understand now. I'm sorry." But some people don't come back. Some people walk away from the wreckage they caused like it was nothing more than a room they exited. And there you are, alone, surrounded by shattered pieces they'll never remember breaking. I remember how I would rehearse the apology I was never going to hear, the conversation I was never going to have. I would replay the moments in my head, thinking maybe if I could just explain the hurt in the right way, they would finally understand, they would finally care enough to fix it. But they didn't. And some of them, honestly, never will. And the cruel part is, you still have to heal. You still have to find a way to pick up the broken parts and build something whole again. Even when they're off living their life untouched by what they left behind. There is something unspeakably hard about healing in places where no one apologized. Something so lonely about having to grieve the loss and carry the responsibility of healing at the same time. Psychologists call this ambiguous grief, a grief that has no clear ending, no clean closure, no ceremonial goodbye. It's the pain that lingers because the wound was never properly acknowledged. And here's what I learned in that quiet, painful space. Waiting for someone else to set you free will keep you trapped forever. They might never own what they did. They might never see the version of you they shattered. But you still deserve to heal. You still deserve to be whole. You still deserve to stand in the mirror and say, I will no longer bleed for people who never offered me a bandage. Some of the most courageous healing happens when you realize, I am not waiting anymore. I am not waiting for their apology. I am not waiting for their validation. I am not waiting for their understanding. I am giving myself the closure they will never give me. I am giving myself permission to walk out of this pain, even if they don't follow me out. And that's one of the bravest things you can ever do, to heal in places where no one apologized, to choose freedom in a story that wanted to keep you trapped, to quietly build yourself where you were left in pieces. There was a season in my life where I genuinely believed I was doing something wrong because my life felt ordinary. I wasn't traveling the world. I wasn't chasing some adrenaline-fueled passion. I wasn't scaling a company or going viral or collecting wild stories I could tell at dinner parties. I was making grocery lists, I was paying bills, I was showing up for quiet conversations with the same familiar faces. I was living what the world would call a small life. And I'll be honest, there were days I scrolled through my phone and felt this gnawing shame, like I was somehow missing out on the life I was supposed to be living. Everyone else seemed to be in motion, chasing something bigger, louder, shinier. And me? I was sitting at my kitchen table, folding laundry, wondering if my life was becoming invisible. There's this silent pressure we don't talk about, the pressure to make life spectacular. We're constantly fed the message that bigger is better, faster is better, busier is better, and we start to believe that a life not documented is a life not fully lived. But here's what I've come to understand, and not just in theory, in my bones. The most sacred moments are usually the smallest ones. The most meaningful life isn't necessarily the most impressive one. Sometimes the life that saves you is the one you thought was too boring to matter. There's a psychological concept called hedonic adaptation. It's the idea that no matter how big the highs are, we eventually adjust, we return to a baseline, and we crave the next big thing. It's why so many people get trapped in the cycle of chasing peak experiences that leave them emptier over time. But there's something even deeper. Contentment, adaptation, a quieter rhythm of life that doesn't rely on highs to feel whole. It's learning to find beauty in the ordinary, satisfaction in the routine, joy in the simple, and peace in the predictable. There's nothing wrong with wanting adventure or building something bold, but sometimes we become so obsessed with escaping our lives that we miss the miracle of what we already have. I remember sitting on my couch one evening, the room dim, the sound of soft breathing from someone I love sleeping nearby, and realizing this is it, this quiet moment. This is what I will miss someday. This is what I will long for when life gets loud again. Loving your ordinary life doesn't mean you've given up on growth. It doesn't mean you've given up on growth. It doesn't mean you've stopped waiting for life to look like someone else's, to feel like yours is enough. I once read, "Don't trade your peace for performance." And I would add, don't trade your quiet joy for noisy validation. Your life doesn't have to impress anyone to be beautiful. Your boring life, the coffee in the morning, the soft pajamas, the conversations no one else hears, that can be your freedom. That can be your home. That can be enough. There's a tenderness that comes with building something new inside yourself. A dream, a boundary, a belief, a version of you that finally feels honest. And it's natural to want to share that. We crave connection. We crave being seen. But I learned, sometimes the hard way, that not everyone can handle what you're building. Not everyone deserves front row seats to your becoming. I remember when I first started rebuilding parts of myself that had been silent for years. I was excited, I was hopeful, I was finally beginning to trust my own voice, my own pace, my own healing. And in that early, fragile stage, I made the mistake of sharing that growth with people who were still committed to the older, smaller version of me. People who needed me to stay who I was because it kept their world comfortable. I told someone about a dream I had. It wasn't even fully formed yet. It was a soft idea, a quiet spark. And they laughed. Not in a cruel way, but in that dismissive, oh, you can't do that kind of way. And I shrank. I doubted myself. I nearly buried the dream. There's this myth that if people love you, they'll automatically understand you. But sometimes people can love you and still not be equipped to hold the weight of your growth. Sometimes they project their own fears onto your path because they're afraid of what your change might mean for them. Psychologists call this enmeshment anxiety. It's when people subconsciously resist your growth because it threatens the emotional structure they've built with you. Your expansion unsettles them. Your new boundaries make them uncomfortable. Your healing means they might have to face their own wounds. And here's the thing, they're not necessarily bad people. They're just not safe places for the delicate, sacred parts of what you're building. There's a deep wisdom in knowing when to protect what's tender, when to build behind closed doors, when to quietly nurture your own becoming without broadcasting it to people who won't get it. Not everything you're growing needs to be shared right away. Not every part of your healing needs to be witnessed to be real. There's power in sacred privacy. I used to think I had to prove my growth to people who doubted me, but now I understand it's not my job to convince people that I'm becoming someone worth believing in. Sometimes you simply outgrow the spaces that once held you. Sometimes your healing demands solitude. Sometimes the safest way to honor your new life is to let some people have less access to it. I've come to believe that building in silence isn't about secrecy. It's about giving your growth the shelter it needs to take root before it's strong enough to withstand the winds of outside opinions. I love this quote, "When your roots are deep, you don't fear the storm." But here's the part we don't talk about. Roots don't grow in public. They grow in the dark. They grow in quiet soil. They grow where they are protected. So if you're building something right now, your peace, your voice, your boundaries, protect it. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise. Because you know some things are too sacred to risk on people who can't carry them. Build in silence, build carefully, build for you. There's a hollow kind of loneliness that hits when you realize no one is coming to save you. No one's texting to check in. No one's asking how you really are. No one's showing up at your door with answers or a plan or the words you've been aching to hear. And it's in those moments, those raw, brutal moments, where you have to decide, will I abandon myself too? I spent a long time waiting for someone to notice my sinking, I thought love meant someone would always see when I was slipping beneath the surface. I thought support would look like someone reaching out right at the breaking point, pulling me back just in time. But sometimes they don't notice. Sometimes they're too busy, too distracted, or simply too unaware of what it looks like when you're barely holding it together. And that's the part that stings. Not just the pain itself, but the silent realization that no one else seems to feel the weight you're carrying. I remember one of the hardest seasons of my life. I was surrounded by people, but I had never felt more alone. I kept waiting for a text that didn't come, waiting for a hand that never reached for me. And one morning, as I sat on the edge of my bed, exhausted by my own waiting, I realized something. I am the one who has to show up now. I am the one who has to sit with myself, walk with myself, fight for myself, hold my own hand through this. Psychologists call this self-compassion resilience. It's the ability to care for yourself, not in a surface level self-care day way, but in a deep, committed, loving way, as if you were someone you are fiercely responsible for. And let me tell you, this is not the easy path. It's easier to wait for someone else to rescue you. It's easier to believe that healing will start when the right person comes along, when the right friendship arrives, when the right love fills the empty seat next to you. But when you make the choice to show up for yourself first, it changes everything. It's not about becoming self-sufficient to the point where you don't need anyone. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't abandon themselves when things get heavy. It's about becoming your own safe place. It's about being the voice that says, I know it's hard, I know you're tired, but I'm not going to leave you. I'm here. I've got you. I once read something that I've carried with me ever since. Be the person you needed when you were breaking. I can't tell you how many days I've whispered to myself, we're going to get through this, you and me. Because sometimes that's all you have, and sometimes that's enough. You don't always need a crowd. You don't always need the rescue. Sometimes the most beautiful, unshakable power you will ever find is in the quiet decision to stand by yourself when no one else does. That's the kind of loyalty that saves you. That's the kind of love that rebuilds you. And that's the kind of showing up that no one can take away from you. You don't have to build loudly to build powerfully. You don't have to be seen to be unstoppable. The most sacred work is often done in silence, where no one claps, but you come home to yourself. So build yourself quietly, one small, courageous moment at a time. That's the kind of growth no one can take from you.